Conclusions are often understood as simply summarizing what you've said, and that's not completely untrue. Conclusions are do serve a summary function, but they're not just the end point to your essay. They're your last chance to convince your reader of your argument's validity and importance. Therefore, it's important that you develop, you craft a conclusion that resonates emotionally or intellectually with the reader, leaving them with something to ponder about after they've finished reading. You want to write something that the reader will think about when they're having dinner later that night. You want to write something, you want to write words and sentences that will linger around their mind. And this is what we call concluding with impact. Um, to do this, I believe there are four objectives that your conclusion needs to fulfill. It needs to reinforce your thesis. Again, this is your final opportunity to remind the reader of the strength and validity of your argument. It needs to echo your main points. So this is the summary function that I spoke about earlier that you can't escape. You need to summarize it. But here you need to attempt to not be repetitive. So you need to be quite clear on the main points, go through it quickly, and don't provide new arguments. Just write it in different words. Provide a fresh perspective when you're revisiting your main points. You need to link back to your introduction. Again, earlier in the lesson, I said that a reader should more or less be able to read your introduction and conclusion and know what your argument is. This is where linking back to the introduction also comes into play. You want your conclusion to be the sum of the whole, including your introduction. And lastly, I like to end with a call to action or final thought. You don't need to call to action. A common one you'll see in academic writing is people writing this particular aspect should be studied more, this particular aspect needs to be scrutinized, we need to reconsider how we think about XYZ, stuff like that. You don't necessarily need to do that, but you could pose a provocative question, a prediction, or a recommendation. I think recommendations, for example, are great if you've built up an argument where you can present a strong recommendation. That can really make sure that the reader leaves your essay thinking, that was a solid argument. And there's a recommendation I can take from that and think, how could that be applied in real life? And here on the right side of the slide, I've included a view of how I want conclusions to move from just summarizing to being impactful, to have any impact on the reader when they're reading it. And I encourage you to read through this. Conclusions are hard, especially because you can feel like you're repetitive, and that's challenging. But I think if you keep in mind that your conclusions aren't just meant to repeat what you said, but they serve a really critical role as they're the last thing your reader is likely to read, then I hope you'll be energized to spend a bit more time on your conclusion and write something good but concise.